because there's a lot of people here that would be interested in going knocking on doors, making phone calls for someone that's in Northern Virginia. Based on that lower turnout, who are the candidates that you think are most at risk of losing in 2019? Because not only to take back the, the incumbents, because to take back the House, not only do we need to protect our incumbents, but we need to go out statewide and pick up a few other seats. Who are those candidates, and what are the opportunities?
Okay, so the first one and probably the most vulnerable Democrat is going to be Wendy Geditis in the 10th district, which stretches from Leesburg out all the way into Frederick County. She's particularly vulnerable because her vote came from the condensed, the very small precincts right around Leesburg. She's won overwhelmingly in there. That tends to be, in terms of Loudoun County, one of the younger areas of the county, which turns out in a gubernatorial year, not in an off-off year. And Leesburg also does not have heavily contested local elections in the off-off years. They had their mayor's election this year. Their supervisor's very popular. She's basically unopposed. So in a lot of ways, in the 10th district, Wendy Geditis is on her own in terms of turning out voters in Leesburg. And in the western part of the district, in the more rural part, they do turn out in every election consistently at much better numbers than the Democrats do around Leesburg. So right off the top, Wendy. I would say number two probably would be Danica Rome in northern part of Prince William. Now I think that she has a unique ability to sort of move around that, in that she has a national fundraising base, and it's interesting because if you had asked people 2 years ago, they would have said Danica is a really weak candidate. She can't, hold a swing district. In fact, she turned out to be a stronger candidate than most of other candidates because she had access to communicate, and once she started communicating, people liked her. So the fact that she has access to those kind of resources to communicate, I think she actually will end up being all right, but demographically, she has issues in her district. Manassas, Lee Carter. He's created his own issues, and on top of that, Manassas doesn't vote in off-off year elections the way that the rest of the county does. I'll also point out Manassas City, which is the centric point of his district. They don't have the local elections driving turnout the way that Prince William County will in the Prince William seats. People that are stronger than, than you might think and already as freshmen would be Jennifer Carroll Foy is going to be in a very strong position. Elizabeth Guzman's in a very strong position. Kathy Tran has a district of exactly those types of Democratic voters that are surging right now. She's going to do very well. David Reed has a district, again, high income, precinct that's likely to come back, probably going to be in pretty good shape. That's Northern Virginia. Downstate. Holla's had a weird district. She's got the high income areas around Occoquan that probably will come back, but then she also runs through the county out to the western part of the county where it is going to be rougher. So I put her somewhere probably in the middle. In terms of the downstate delegates, a lot of this is also driven by who else has contests on the ballot with them that will help turn people out. So I think at the start, there were a lot of people that thought that Dawn Adams would be extremely vulnerable. Dawn Adams is in fantastic shape with 2019, I think, because she overlaps with the competitive state Senate seat that's in that area in the most Democratic precincts. And I'm not seeing, I can't imagine why people would vote to toss out Glenn Sturdivant for Senate, which he lost those precincts overwhelmingly even last time, and then toss her at the same day. It just doesn't make any logical sense. So I feel like she's in strong shape. Where the other two in Richmond and the Henrico area, I think, have a lot bigger problems, Skylar Van Valkenburg and Deborah Rodman, because they overlap in a Senate seat with, I have to mispronounce her name, Siobhan Durnavan. Anyway, I can't ever get that one. Who's a very popular doctor from that area, ran very well in 2015. This environment, there's not a lot of, even though people call themselves independent, there's not a lot of crossover going on. Independents are getting into their camps with one side or the other in each election. So I think somebody's got to go there. And I don't know if it's going to be the senator, Republican senator, or the two Democratic delegates, but I don't think there's going to be a lot of crossover, and I think that's going to be the center point of one of them's going to go. Then in the Virginia Beach area, the two Democratic new delegates down there both represent the parts of Virginia Beach that voted for Democrats for state Senate last time. So they're probably in pretty good shape as a starting point. for 2019.
Turpin is part of it.
Turpin, yeah, which is Turpin and Fowler.
Oh, okay.
Fowler, I'm pretty sure. Then, of course, there's the Newport News seat, which infamous for being the coin flip. That's our best chance for a House pickup. That should have been a House pickup to begin with. You know, it was a strange result to begin with. I think what drove this was the Democratic candidate there had run in 2015 and lost overwhelmingly, and so she just didn't get a lot of support in 2017 the way she should have in that environment. But that seat is overwhelmingly Democratic. I mean, that's a just solidly blue seat, and so with her being supported and targeted, it's just hard to imagine how she hasn't flipped that. So that's the one that is the most likely to flip to the Democrats, with the ones up here probably being the most vulnerable to flipping back to the Republicans.
And I guess the couple other factors that you got to think about, which we don't know, but the redistricting plan the court could come out with a plan any day now, and that could make a lot of seats vulnerable in the Virginia Beach area. And then, of course, the other issue is this is not a typical election. I mean, a typical off-year election, in that you still have a very unpopular president in the state of Virginia, and you still have a lot of energized people, whether it be the same level as 2017. To your point, can we recreate that same kind of turnout? And that will be a challenge for our caucus and everyone in this room to help us do that. But I think those are two factors that I think give us certainly a fighting chance to take back the House. Do you agree?
Yeah, and I think that when you have a election that's going to be low turnout like this, in some of these seats you have a special election environment when they're alone. You know, up here we have so many other things that overlap that you don't ever get hyper low turnout in the off year. They're just low. But downstate you can get surprises because you can have seats that everyone else on the ballot's unopposed, and they operate like a special election. And weird things can happen in special elections. Right now we're having a special in the 24th district, which could flip to the Democrats. I don't think it will. By numbers it shouldn't. But the Republicans had a caucus and their candidate won by 1 vote. And apparently the candidate who lost by 1 vote doesn't think he lost. So he's planning to run again. And he said to the newspaper today that he, if people want to write him in, he's not asking for them to write him in, but that bodes really well, like in a low turnout special with Democrats energized. I think the most complicating factor to having 2019 be like 2017 is what we see happen in off-year elections, and everyone who's been through this knows this, is the off-year election is a month and a half before Iowa. And it's 2 months before New Hampshire, right? And so Democrats tend to start going into their camps when we don't have an incumbent president in off-year elections, and you see a lot more discussion of, Democratic candidates being asked, well, I'm a Bernie person, are you for Bernie, are you for universal health care? Which isn't super helpful in the marginal swing districts when everyone gets in their camps and does that. And that's just a factor we've seen play out every time we have one of these off-year elections without a Democratic incumbent president, is that people start getting in their camps well before this election and they're thinking about the presidential. So, what we probably need in order to have a real chance of taking back the House of Delegates, I think the Senate will flip. I mean, I would say if you said percentage, there's like an 80% chance the Senate will flip and like a 15% chance the House of Delegates will flip. Sorry. But if you wanted to create a scenario where we would have the best chance, it would be nationalizing the election. It would be having the national candidates come into Virginia and campaign with these local candidates. And if they're willing and the Democrats are able to bring them in, that's going to create the kind of environment that gives us our best chance to win. And that is the polar opposite of where Virginia Democrats have been forever, right? We've always not wanted the national Democrats to come in. And I remember even in 2017, one of the big internal fights in the caucus, and I'm bad about getting this information, I'm just blabbering it, right? But one of the big fights they had that never made the newspapers was there was a delegate who had Nancy Pelosi who wanted to come in and do a fundraiser for us, probably would have netted $250,000, and the Democratic leadership wouldn't allow Pelosi to come to Virginia. Okay, and I know you were on the side of bringing her in, but like there was a a big kerfuffle about this where, and this is the entire Democratic leadership, by the way, not just the outgoing Democratic leader, they didn't want Nancy Pelosi to come in. The reality is Nancy Pelosi is more popular than they are. Like, there's no branding problem with her. If people were voting on Nancy Pelosi as an election, the fact that they're voting on her, we've already lost because the topic's not on our discussion, right? It has nothing to do with her personally. It just has to do that if she's the topic, it means that the whole discussion's in another area. For her to come in, it wouldn't have lost, in my opinion, wouldn't have lost a vote for a single House delegates candidate. I can't imagine some voter in one of these marginal districts saying, oh, Nancy Pelosi came in and did a fundraiser for the state Democrats, and so I can't vote for my Democratic candidate for the House of Delegates. It's absurd. And you see how close we came in the marginal districts to taking a majority. And we really, and this is the truth, if it wasn't for Win Virginia and what Win Virginia did in the last election of targeting those seats that were beyond what the Democratic caucus did, we would have only picked up 6 or 7 seats. And it would have not have been the night that it was. We were lucky that we had a group come through and provide some baseline support and funding to that second tier level races because they just weren't getting it. And that was an environment where they were ready to win, but no one was ready to let them win. And I would just say as one add-on to that, the other factor that hurts going forward in the House of Delegates because of that is that now in these marginal districts, we have some incumbents that don't want to get support from the party because they don't trust the party. And that makes it an added complicated factor because after they didn't get support last time, they don't really trust the party to follow through and support them this time. And that makes things more complicated when you're trying to do it. So even though we'll get new leadership, you know, it's very tough to bring them back after that happens.
And what do you think about the Boy Scout mayor race coming up?
Should be overwhelmingly for Boy Scout in the state Senate special. Joe May is a uniquely strong candidate, but it doesn't seem like people independents are not going for candidates on their merits right now. They're going based on sending messages. And so in an even environment, that'd be a really competitive election. In this environment, it probably goes to Boy Scout pretty overwhelmingly. I just wouldn't take it guaranteed. I think that we're more vulnerable in the special election for her House seat because the candidate there's going to be unknown. And the Republicans got 46% of the vote in 2015 against Boy Scout. And Boy Scout had run before. She was actually a very good candidate. And so what we're looking at for this special is, you know, there's a couple candidates, they're not as strong as Boy Scouts. And so I think the House seat could be vulnerable, still leaning Democratic, but that'll be a real race.
Other questions for Ben? That's what I like about Ben is he tells you like he sees it. Craig.
If Patrick will let you dope out the leadership race.
Yeah. Can I get out of the camera?
Yeah, exactly. I would not be shocked.
Does everyone know what's going on? Our minority leader for the House Democratic Party is stepping down at the end of the year, David Toscano. And so there are 4 members of our caucus, 4 or 5 members of our members of our caucus that are running. So,
the weird part of this election is 4 of them are in the same faction. So of the 5 candidates, Eileen Fillercorn, Marcus Simon, Charnel, and Rip from Northern Virginia. Those are they're all sort of in the same faction. They were not supportive of making any leadership changes this year. Now we know why. Because they wanted to preserve the leadership to be available, I guess. But they've all been sort of the David Toscano wing of the party. Sam Rasool's not. I don't think that Sam's wing of the party per se in the House of Delegates will ever have a majority. But I think that Sam, because he has that unique following, is going to get a surprising number of votes, which is going to advance him. And so then the leadership race is, because the way this works is they have a leadership vote for the top 5, for the 5 candidates, and whoever's the lowest vote getter, they then revote at 4, revote at 3. It's not IRV, not on the first ballot. They actually have to get back up, do speeches.
It could have been, but they rejected it.
They rejected it. We've had a couple times where this ended in ties, actually, in leadership elections. The most legendary one was one between Chris Amundsen and Ken Plum, where they actually tied on the first ballot. And I remember hearing, I can't remember one of these events, it was public, so I can actually say this, but Adam Evidence said he flipped his vote because he wanted to end the tie and just end the dispute, but someone else didn't tell him and flipped their vote also, so the second and then apparently they flipped back again and it was a third tie, and then finally someone settled it and they figured out how to not have a tie. People were flipping their votes and just canceling each other out. But so what I think the leadership election will come down to is which of those four can get into the final vote, probably with Sam. It's possible that Eileen and Charnel, if they got enough together early on, Sam could be third and that they could just be in the top two. But more than likely, I think Sam will make enough votes to make it very hard for two people to overcome him before they're head-to-head. And then likely whoever's against him in the final round will probably beat him. That would be my guess. So if I was going to put odds on it, I'd put odds on Charnel winning because she's already in the leadership and she probably has the most people that would say whether they think she's the best leader or not, that she's a second or third choice. Where I think that Eileen and Rip and Marcus probably have the people that they have, but not as many willing to go to them and run off elections. So most likely I would guess Charnel, but don't be surprised to see Sam maybe even being the top vote getter in the first ballot if this ever comes out. I will work very hard to make it come out. I always work very hard to get these things to come out. Patrick's never very helpful on that, but luckily some people are, and you know, it's good to know afterwards what happens. Usually they just come out, it's like the Pope, you know, you have some white smoke and you have it later. But I will try to bring everybody.
The election's on Saturday, so we'll know on Saturday. Other questions for, not Larry South?
Patrick, just a quick question of you
Yes.
before I cut out on the gun issue when it comes to sales.